Hello everyone, and depending on when you're watching this, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I'd like to start off by thanking the IMF for considering one of my personal projects worthy of a webinar, and hope that all of you watching this also find it worth your time. I'm Sankar Sridhar. I'm an award-winning photographer, author, and travel writer, and the images and experiences that I'll be sharing with you today are from my journeys into Ladakh, a union territory that many of you may have already visited, and those of you who have not most likely are planning to visit sometime soon. To say that Ladakh is popular would be a massive understatement. And so I'll skip everything that you know about Ladakh and dive into what today's webinar is all about, the winters on the Changthang. My first brush with a Ladakhi winter happened in 2003, when a friend from Padum in the Zanskar Valley invited me to his house. When he told me that the journey would take 10 days one way and that the route was through a gorge and on the frozen surface of a river, I didn't really know what to expect. Yes, I did imagine landscapes draped in snow and remote villages nestled in the folds of mountains, and he did warn me about the severity of the cold. But what he failed to mention was that the savagery of this cold was matched, if not exceeded, by the kind of beauty it created. Entire class 4 rapids standing still, as if someone had pressed the pause button on a remote. Frosted bubbles of air standing like pillars under the frozen surface of the river. Full-bodied waterfalls paralyzed by the sub-zero temperatures. And then there were the thrilling dangers wherever the river thawed, climbing gorge walls, smoothed and polished by years of erosion, where the difference between life and death was marked by a solitary slip. These and many, many more wonders and adventures lay on this route, a route that I returned to twice again, in 2004 and 2005, on both occasions solo. The idea was to find and test my ice legs, so to speak, and learn from the Zanskaris the art of reading the ice and judging its stability by its color and texture. All of this was geared towards one end, to explore in winter the Changthang, a plateau at an average altitude of 5,000 meters, which also contains the Great Lakes of Ladakh. Finally, in 2016, I decided that I was as ready as I could ever be to take on the Changthang. I had done the Chadar thrice after all, I told myself. How different would the Changthang be? The short answer, very. For starters, there are the winds. Winds that whip up such sandstorms, you would be lucky to be able to see your outstretched hands. And if you were not being pummeled by a sandstorm, chances were that you were battling a blizzard instead. And then, of course, there's the cold. If the cold on the Chadar can freeze the surface of flowing water, on the Changthang, it freezes boiling water that shoots up to the sky. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the image of a geyser. The animals on the Changthang know this cold only too well. They sprout special layers of fur to keep themselves warm. They fatten up before the onset of the lean season, and they stick to the sides of the valleys to escape the wrath of the wind. They also move very little to conserve energy. But to say that the animals are the only beings on the Changthang would be a mistake. There are the Changpa, pastoral nomads who've called these badlands their home. Over the centuries that they have moved from one pasture to the other with their livestock, sheep, pashmina goat, yaks, and horses, they have perfected survival strategies too. They drape themselves in hide, wool, and fur to keep themselves warm. They keep their hearth burning throughout the winter months, fueling it with the dung and droppings of their animals and a root that they collect painstakingly throughout the summer months. On occasion, they also allow their animals to play the nanny to children, cuddling them and keeping them warm when their parents are away. In return, the Changpas protect their animals from their wilder cousins, and they love them like we do our children. They share with them not just their home and hearth, but the stingiest of the Changthang's resources, water. The Changpa are supreme masters of survival, but even more, they are great friends. They are a people with whom I have been traveling for the past 14 years, picking up life lessons along the way that have held me in very good stead on my forays into the Changthang in winter. So before we begin our journey into the Changthang in winter today, I'd like to give you a general overview of what my walks were all about. So this is a map where you can see Leh and the Pangong. And anyone that has been to Leh will tell you that there is a metal road that goes all the way to the lake. In 2006, things were a bit different. There was a, road, yes, but it didn't mean that you could hop into a car and go all the way to the lake in winter. I tried that. But even before I managed to get myself to Changla, which many consider the third highest motorable road in the world, the diesel froze, and soon after that, the batteries died. So today, for all practical purposes, we begin our journey from the far side of the Pangong and walk all the way down to the Pangong. We walk the length of the lake, part ways, and then reach a place called Shushul. From Shushul, we march hard, long, and high to the next lake called Mrepalso. From there, crossing two passes, Kaksangla and Horla, we reach Yayatso, another lake. Then it's all downhill all the way to Mahe. From there, we cover the flat quickly to reach a place called Sumdo. And after that, take the long march to a lower pass called the Polokhonkola, beyond which the Sokar lies. From the Sokar, we retrace our steps to Sumdo and then take in Kyagarso on our way to the Somorari. We spend some time at the Somorari, exploring the lake, and then cross over to Ladakh's best kept secrets, the twin lakes of Kyunso. This was a project that I began in 2006 and it continues even today. The project is very simple. I lug my rucksack, which has food and clothes and my camera gear, and I go from one lake to the other, resting in between at either villages, which are few and far between, or at Changpa settlements where I catch up with friends and recuperate. But back to the story. The valley that leads to the Pangong also has a stream that goes by the name of Pagal Nala. It's not visible on a map, but this is what it looked like to me in 2006. I was blown away by what I saw. But truth be told, this was just the beginning. The Pagal Nala outdid itself for every extra kilometer that I walked, all the way to its marshlands. And beyond that, it gave me the first inkling of the true intensity of the Changthang's cold. A stream frozen so solid, it could support the weight of an entire herd of yak. Each of these animals, mind you, weigh in at more than 300 kilograms. I was excited to say the least because the Pangong lay just 7 or 8 bends from this spot. But as first impressions go, the Pangong was a disappointment. Despite the unholy cold, the lake was largely liquid. As I began pitching camp that evening, I also said a fervent prayer for a Changpa legend to hold at least one grain of truth. The nomads say that none of the Great Lakes of Ladakh freeze gradually over time in winter. They do so suddenly, overnight. And true to form, this is what the Pangong looked like early the next day. In my time in the winters in Ladakh, I have seen so many wonders. You might well brush many of them aside as fiction if I didn't have images to support the stories I'm telling you. This, for instance, is a graveyard of waves. Waves that were frozen mid-motion on the Pangong, broken off and dragged across its frozen surface by the wind and deposited in this one corner. These waves look beautiful even when they are on the lake. They stand out like ridges and stretch all the way to the horizon, marking the final line of impact between ice and water. And boy, how they transform when they catch the first glint of sun. These are the grand beauties on the Pangong. But from where I was, there was beauty everywhere, even under my feet, in the form of bizarre patterns under the surface of the lake. All these images are the images of the Pangong in winter. But the Pangong doesn't lose any of its beauty even during the winter's retreat. This is an image from the thaw. Beyond the Pangong, it's the sandy Changthang all over again, with the winds sweeping the valley floors clean of snow and depositing all of it either on the approach to passes or on the passes themselves. This makes the journeys between lakes, which can last from 4 to 5 days and up to 10 or 12 days depending on the weather. This makes the journey between lakes tiring, grueling, and a thorough exercise in patience. While all of that is expected on a trek, it certainly isn't on an IMF webinar. So we make a beeline for Shushul, and from there, make short work of the steep climb to the passive-aggressive lake of Mrepalso at 5,000 meters. Why passive-aggressive, you ask? Because the lake wears a smile on its surface, but advertises its disdain for travelers in other ways. For instance, this lake doesn't have a source of water, and it has for its banks boulders, rocks, pebbles, and silt. on which you really can't camp. So we take one last look at this utterly fascinating lake, but then make a beeline for another more welcoming cousin, the Yayatso. Many people say that the Yayatso is a volcanic lake, which it could well be. But as far as I am concerned, personally, I look at the Yayatso as a shining example of the art that sun and ice can create. Beyond the Yayatso, we continue our travels through a landscape that can only be the Changthang and reach the point where we take our first look at Sokar, a bland slate of white. It would take me some time to realize, but the Sokar is one of those lakes that prefers to reserve its secrets for the more patient traveler. As I made my way gingerly across its semi-frozen surface and got myself to the other side, I watched this lake transform. The marshes from where this image has been taken are boggy and dangerous in the summer. They are like quicksand and can't support the weight of either man or beast. But like so many miracles that overtake Ladakh in winter, the same marshes harden and they offer up the last sources of food for animals at a time when they need it the most. Beyond the marshes, the Sokar was also a lake from where the Champa collected salt during the barter. Today, such banks of salt offer little except as masquerading as ice or snow in the winter. This would also be a good time to tell you that the walks to Pangong and Sokar are the easiest parts of the trip, largely because there are villages and Champa settlements on the way. But beyond the Sokar, the story is tellingly different. The higher valleys that lead to the Somorari are not cleaned, swept clean by the wind. There are some valleys which are encrusted in permafrost, and others whose benign surface of snow hold hidden streams that refuse to freeze. Before we head up to those valleys though, here is a look of what the Kyagarso or Thadsankaru looks like after a full moon night. Continuing with our story, the only way we can know of the existence of the hidden streams is the hard way. The pools of water that you see in this image are actually footsteps, as my feet have gone down, sunk through the snow, crashed through a layer of surface ice, and drenched my boots and socks as I've tried to make my way forward. But for all this, the welcome that the Somorari reserves makes it worth all the trouble that I've ever taken to get to this lake. A star-spangled carpet of snow that invites me to walk on it all the way to the lake. Now, these are not invitations that I easily turn down, and that's because the Somorari is my favorite. This lake holds many wonders, beginning with the quality of ice that makes it up. It's colorful, it's texturous, and dangerous to look at, but also the safest to walk on. Look closely, and you see these beautiful patterns carved on their surface. This is the work of wind after an especially sunny day, which brings us to the evenings. The Somorari puts up such a spectacular show during the sunset that you rarely, if ever, have to look at the sky to enjoy it. Ephemeral as the Somorari is though, we need to continue our journey. So we walk across the lake to the far bank and begin our climb up, and then graciously accept its parting gift, the rings of Saturn, with each ring marking the gradual retreat of the lake until the sudden freeze. Beyond the Somorari, and after the climb, are broad valleys which are full of wildlife. The Changpa say that the wildlife seeks refuge in these valleys after hurrying out of the valley of the Kyunso, which they think is the coldest valley in Ladakh. It takes around 4 days or 5 days to get to the valley of Kyunso. And when I did that in 2011, I thought I did a good job reaching the valley early in the afternoon. And honestly, the cold in that valley is unlike anything I have felt anywhere else in Ladakh. I can say that even today. I just about managed to pitch my tent and struggled into my sleeping bag, all the while praying that the trouble I had taken to get to this valley would be worth it. It was, because this was the scene that greeted me early the next morning. When I turned to look east, an even grander spectacle was unfolding. Using whatever little energy or adrenaline that was coursing through my body, I booted up and I trotted down to the lake to find a scene straight out of the Arctic. I spent a couple of hours shooting this lake, and in doing so, ran out of batteries, almost ran out of batteries. So I packed up, sacked up, and headed out to Tezagong, where I knew I'd find my friend Tashi, who camps there in winter. My plan was simple. I'd reach Tezagong, rest a few days at Tashi's tent, and then head back to Leh. But once I went there, I heard stories about some Changpa who had gone to another valley called Kuyul, which had been deserted since 2003. This was a great option. So I decided to head to Kuyul. It was a long march, and finally when I reached Kuyul, I found a pack of wolves late in the evening, but no sign of the Changpa. It was distressing, but there was little I could do. So I just called it a day. But I was running strong on luck, because early the next morning, I saw the surest sign of Changpa activity: smoke on the Changthang. I rushed to meet the Changpas, and to say that they were surprised to see me would be an understatement. It took me some time to convince them that I was in Ladakh, on the Indo-Tibet border, in the deepest months of winter, only to take photographs of frozen lakes. But I did a good job, because after a while, they invited me to a little lake that they call their own, from where they collected ice to melt for water. Now, this was a small lake, but it was one of the most beautiful I have seen. Like I told you, I had run out of batteries and I managed only one shot. When I began my journeys into the Changthang in winter in 2006, my agenda was simple. First, I would assess whether it was worth the risk, and if it was, I would quickly document all the lakes, cobble together my images and stories, and bring out a second book on Ladakh. Today, after seeing all of this, I continue to visit Ladakh every winter to hunt for and find smaller, unmarked, unknown, and seasonal lakes. I don't know when my project is going to end, but all this time in Ladakh, for me at least, has been time well spent. Thank you.